For the big 150, I decided to play Devil May Cry, the awesome action hack and slash game from Capcom. I remember first playing a demo of it, which was included, I think, with Resident Evil Code Veronica. Maybe it was Resident Evil 4. I don't remember, I just know it was a Resident Evil game. Anyway, as a disclaimer, I recorded all the footage for this review off of the Devil May Cry PS3 compilation, so the graphics are going to be in high definition, but otherwise, the gameplay is the same. A little bit of background info before I start on the mechanics of the game. Devil May Cry was originally supposed to be Resident Evil 4, but the developers decided that the game was a bit too action-heavy. Apparently they decided that the game wasn't entirely worth scrapping, so they created Devil May Cry from the prototype. Of course, this is a very brief history, but if you want to know more, I'm sure you know how to Google. In Devil May Cry, you play as Dante, a demon hunter. A woman named Trish approaches him in his shop and beats him up a bit, before saying that she needs his help to stop the underworld Emperor Mundus from escaping his prison. Really, the story starts off pretty cliché, but there are some redeeming factors in the plot that make the game worthwhile. For one, Dante isn't just your average demon slayer. He's part demon himself. As such, he gets into a few predicaments that would kill a normal mortal. For one, right in the intro, he gets stabbed in the chest with his own sword, but then just casually pulls it out.
As a child, I had powers. There's demonic blood in me.
What strength?
You were the first one to know about my vengeance. Looks like I'm getting closer.
Later on, when you get the sword Alistar, he gets completely impaled with it, and then manages to just stand up and go through it. He takes quite a bit of punishment throughout the game. He's not completely immortal, but he's definitely not just human. Secondly, Dante is a smartass. This makes the few exchanges between him and the enemies humorous to watch. He will often give sarcastic responses to remarks given to him. He does show a compassionate side at times, but there's reasons for that, which are evident throughout those scenes. So as for the game, it's your standard action game. It's broken up into about 24 missions, which are really just the stages of the game. The game is fairly linear, although there are times that you can explore the game's world a bit. As Dante runs around, he'll encounter various demonic entities, ranging from possessed life-size puppets to shape-shifting shadows, to even an insane creature that throws exploding eyeballs at you. The creatures are very detailed and all have specific attack patterns that you can exploit. Dante has two main weapon types. He can equip both melee weapons and guns. There's about 4 different weapons of each type. He starts off with the Force Edge, which is your basic sword with no special abilities. Alistar is obtained in the second mission, and it is known for quick attacks. Ifrit is a set of gauntlets that lets Dante hit a bit slower but harder, also allowing him to charge up his attacks to do much more massive damage. Later on in the game, the Force Edge is upgraded to the Sparta, which doesn't really seem to be all that useful like Alistar. Why? Well, you have the Devil Trigger. When Dante attacks enemies or taunts successfully, his Devil Trigger will increase, which is the bar of runes right underneath the health meter. When you have at least 3 full runes, you can press L1 to activate Devil Trigger mode, which is Dante's demonic side. In this mode, Dante's health will slowly regenerate, he will move faster, and his attacks will be altered slightly depending on what weapon is equipped. Alistar will give him a much quicker attack rate, and Ifrit will buff up his attack strength. In addition, those two weapons can also give you additional attacks, which can be bought at one of the statues at a time. Ifrit mostly deals with some heavy fire attacks, while Alistar will attribute its attacks with quickness. You can also fly around and throw down lightning with Alistar, which is a huge advantage against some of the bosses. As for Force Edge and Sparta, neither of these swords will allow you to access a Devil Trigger mode, so no runes will be shown. Because of this, I can say I hardly ever use those weapons. This is unusual, especially for Sparta though. This sword was supposedly the one equipped by Dante's father, also named Sparta. Sure, technically it's the same sword as the Force Edge, just with its full potential unlocked. For Sparta, an actual full-blooded demon, you'd think he'd have more power included with that weapon. So not having any sort of Devil Trigger at all with that sword, it's a bit unusual in my opinion. Onto the guns. Again, there's not a huge selection, but each has their own uses. You start with Ebony and Ivory, which are twin pistols. They may not do a huge amount of damage, but you can fire them as quickly as you can press the square button. Because of this, you can juggle the puppets up in the air by slashing them up and then riddling them with bullets. Next up was my favorite firearm, the good old trusty shotgun. It doesn't have much of a range, but it packs a punch at close range. Because of this, I prefer this over all of the other weapons. Next up is the grenade launcher. It's not the best, and it's not the worst. My thing with it is, yes, it's powerful, but when firing it, it halts Dante in his tracks, so it makes you a sitting duck. Fortunately, explosions from the grenade launcher don't hurt Dante. There's also a weapon called the Nightmare Beta, which uses the devil trigger like ammo. Personally, I didn't find much use with this weapon, so I never used it. You also have access to a spirit gun, but it will rarely be used. It is a weapon that is available only while underwater. It has short range, and like the grenade launcher, forces Dante to stand still. However, since you're underwater, it's a bit easier to avoid getting hit, since there's not a lot of enemies that are waterborne anyway. As I said, there's only a handful of times you'll ever need to use this. Other than the Nightmare Beta, all firearms have infinite ammo. In addition, using one of these weapons along with either Alistar or Ifrit will result in the bullets being enchanted with the proper element. Ifrit is much more noticeable, since Dante will be firing large blasts of red bullets. They seem to do much more damage than Alistar as well. Having infinite ammo opens up a lot of larger opportunities to stylize how you kill your enemies, and that's part of the fun of Devil May Cry. In battle, you are actually rated on how stylish your combos are. You start off with dull, but the more damage you do and the more you vary your moves, you may get to stylish, which is the best ranking. The rankings increase how many red orbs each enemy drops when defeated. Combat itself is just plain fun. The controls are simplistic enough so that it's easy to pick up, yet complex enough to properly do advanced maneuvers. Pressing triangle performs your sword attacks, and holding R1 and pressing square fires off your firearms. You don't need to go into the menu to switch between firearms and melee, but only if you want to change out what weapons you have equipped at the moment. Dante always has one melee and one firearm at all times. R1 can also be used to perform a lot of the more advanced techniques that are available to Dante. By holding R1, pressing backwards on the left analog stick, and pressing triangle, Dante will execute an attack that propels the enemy into the air. If you hold triangle while doing this, Dante will leap into the air as well. By doing the same button combination but pressing forward on the analog stick, Dante will dive forward in a straight slash. There's a bunch of other moves that you can perform if you play around a bit or explore the help menus. To be able to use these moves, you'll need to buy them from the Statues of Time. The red orbs that the enemies drop are used as currency. In a few parts of the game, such as the first room, you'll have to use these orbs to unlock sealed doors, but it's not often that this is required. This shop can also be found in between missions. In addition to extra moves for Alistar and Ifrit, you can also purchase support items. These range from blue and purple orbs that increase your max XP and devil trigger amounts, yellow orbs that act as extra lives, and restorative green orbs. One thing to keep in mind is that when purchasing support items, the next purchase of that item will be much more expensive. As you play, you'll notice that there's a constantly updating journal that explains the background, attacks, and weak points of your enemies. It always starts out with just the background that explains where the monster came from, but after fighting them, you'll see more info get added. A thing I like is that the journal won't update just because you're fighting them, but instead will only add an entry when you experience the attack or weak point. For example, if you fight a shadow and it doesn't do its spinning attack at you, it won't be in the journal until it does. I really enjoy this method of unlocking entries in the game's monster diary. While you are running around, you can also stumble upon hidden, secret missions. These are quite a few of these. I believe the exact number is 16. The price for each is a blue orb piece. 4 of those equals 1 full blue orb, not unlike Legend of Zelda games. Some of these are fairly simple, others not so much. The first one you may happen upon is one where you have to squish a bunch of spiders without using any weapons or items. There's another one that's similar where weapons are allowed. If you backtrack a bit, you'll meet up on one where you have to kill a Scythe-type enemy with 1 critical hit. These are simple compared to others, like fighting 3 shadows at one time and being told you only have 1 chance, or trying to use a stairway of skulls that reach the blue orb piece. Some of these are very simple to find, others require you to backtrack quite a bit. In fact, without an FAQ, I can't say that I would have found them all. These are fun diversions to the remainder of the game, and should be seeked out if you're looking for 100% completion. So what of these massive boss encounters? Every few missions you'll happen upon a boss. Overall, there's only about 5 total creatures that will show up as bosses, but each time you encounter one, you'll gain new skills. First up is Phantom, where you really get a glimpse into Dante's personality. It's a giant spider that contains blood made of lava. He'll assault you in the middle of stages at times with a reduced life bar, and if you can take him out to make him retreat, he'll drop a generous helping of red orbs. He enjoys trying to crush you, spitting fireballs, and making lava pillars appear. His weakness is his face and his back, so you need to make sure that you're not just striking his armored legs. Next is Griffin, a giant eagle that enjoyed raining down lightning storms at you. Unlike Phantom, none of its body is armored, so you can strike it at will. At times you may be able to drop him to the ground, where its weak point is pretty evident, so it's best to rush it and do damage. Overall, Griffin isn't particularly hard. In fact, I found him to be easier than Phantom, especially if you use Ifrit. Third up, you encounter Nello Angelo, although technically you first meet up with him in between Phantom and Griffin. Right from the start, you know he probably has some sort of connection to Dante, and it's revealed in a very small scene when you defeat him for the last time. If you're not paying attention, chances are you will miss it. He attacks with his gigantic sword, and will also be able to teleport around. He will also throw orbs of energy at you. In the final battle, he'll summon small swords to keep attacking Dante. On harder difficulties, these small swords become more than an annoyance. The other main boss is the Nightmare. It's a giant mass of god knows what that just sits on the floor. Its weakness is an energy core that only appears for short periods of time. It also requires that you smack the runes on the walls a few times, as it brightens up the room a bit. In addition, if you don't have those runes lit, the Nightmare can send a few blobs your way to grab and pull Dante to an alternate dimension. In here, you'll have to fight a few skulls and then a weakened version of a prior boss. If you survive all this, Dante will emerge from the Nightmare, doing a nice chunk of damage, so sometimes it may be a good idea to purposely get yourself pulled in. In addition to that, it can fire small projectiles, a circling blade, and an ice beam that can freeze Dante quickly. In addition, it will occasionally drain Dante's Devil Trigger, so you don't want to hoard it for these battles. The only other boss of note is Mundus, the Emperor of the Underworld. For some reason, the first part of the battle takes place in space, where Dante is flying towards Mundus in his demonic form. In this battle, Dante uses his Devil Trigger to summon a large dragon to fly into Mundus. This battle can be difficult because the controls are vastly different than the rest of the game. It's hard to judge the projectiles that Mundus flings at you, and those damn beams are difficult to evade. It's best to destroy the rocks that are summoned around Mundus, and using the Devil Trigger to take care of them. After this, both Dante and Mundus crash to the earth, and have to fight in a river of lava. Dante once again gets to use his Devil Trigger, but here he just throws a ton of fireballs towards Mundus. This fight isn't exactly really too difficult. There is one final battle with him, but I won't spoil that for you. I'll just say it's not exactly hard if you have the right abilities. They might feel out of the norm for the rest of the game, but these battles are really fun to partake in. Maybe it's because they're different, or maybe it's just because they feel epic, but the fight feels like a true ending to the game. In addition, the game ramps up slowly to the end battles against Mundus. The majority of the game takes place in the Melee Island mansion. When you're not inside of it, you're either underneath the caverns of it, or the backyard. Once you get cleared from the entire mansion, you will enter the underworld itself. After this, you'll encounter Mundus in his palace-like room, and then the final battles commence. Once Mundus is defeated, you have a few minutes to escape the crumbling mansion. It all flows perfectly, and nothing really feels like it's forced in. Perhaps something that helps that is the atmosphere given to Devil May Cry. Everything has that medieval and gothic feel to it. From the pillars shown in the mansion to the cemetery and Colosseum grounds in the back. Even the creepy forest feels like it belongs in the game. When you access the underworld, you'll see pulsing walls with some sort of stringy tentacles coming out to fuel up Dante. Again, the environment just feels right. To add to this, the music is just as enjoyable. When not fighting, there's a very atmospheric mood to the tracks. When fighting, it's a completely different story. You get an awesome rock riff that starts playing, just building up the adrenaline while Dante dispatches the demonic creatures inhabiting the mansion. You'll hear the fighting music quite a bit, yet it never gets old. Bosses each have different music as well, but it's equally as good as the rest of the game. Overall, the crew that worked on Devil May Cry created a perfect game. It's good, old-fashioned fun. All the elements bring it together. The upgradable skill sets, the gothic visuals, unique enemies, array of weapons, and even Dante himself all blend it together to make the game that plays well. In addition, the challenge level is equally balanced. If you play it on normal, you'll have a few difficult parts, but it won't feel overbearing. Hard mode adjusts to give you a slightly more hellish challenge, and I won't even tell you how brutal Dante Must Die mode is. Overall, if you're an action game fan, this is a must play. Final score? 10 out of 10. This is Reaper, facebook.com/ReapersReviews. Happy fragging.